HOA Karen painted my solar panels that night. 3 homes were robbed in the blackout. Ever wonder how far someone will go just to prove a petty point? What if I told you that a single act of HOA spite turned into a neighborhood-wide emergency? All because of one woman's obsession with aesthetics. My name's Leo Ramirez. I'm 42, single dad, former Navy technician turned energy consultant, and I live in a small Arizona suburb that pretends to be a gated utopia but feels more like a poorly disguised dictatorship run by lawn-obsessed tyrants. I thought I'd found peace here. I really did. But then came Karen Monroe, the newly elected president of our HOA, with a glitter pen in one hand and a vendetta in the other. Karen didn't like my solar panels. She said they reflected sunlight into her dining room and disrupted the visual harmony of the cul-de-sac. You'd think I'd painted a mural of Satan on my roof the way she reacted. But here's the kicker: those panels weren't just cosmetic. They powered my entire house. More than that, I had a small battery backup system that supplied emergency energy to 2 elderly neighbors who relied on CPAP machines and refrigerated medication. I explained all this. I even gave her a full spec sheet, something she probably used as a coaster for her wine glass. She didn't care. To Karen, it was about order, control, and her warped idea of beauty. That afternoon, I came home from picking up my daughter at softball practice and immediately knew something was off. My cameras, solar-powered, were dead. My smart lights wouldn't respond. I went up to the roof and nearly fell through the shingles when I saw it. Gray paint, slathered across every panel. Like someone had taken a roller and tried to color correct the sun. My jaw locked. Couldn't even breathe. At first, I thought it might have been vandals. But then I checked my Ring footage, the one camera wired into backup power. And there she was, Karen, in her HOA badge vest, sunglasses on, hair in a bun, painting my solar panels with industrial gray house paint like she was brushing a canvas. I should have called the cops right then. But it got worse. That night, the power grid in our block went down. Some freak transformer surge combined with extreme heat standard stuff here, which is why so many of us invested in solar. But now, no backup power. Not for me. Not for my neighbors. That blackout lasted 5 hours. And in those 5 hours, 3 homes were broken into. One of them, the Marshalls, an older couple who lived 2 doors down. They'd moved here after retiring from Kansas. Sweet people. But that night, someone kicked in their sliding door, stole their meds, jewelry, and terrified them half to death. They had no power, no alarms, no ring cam, nothing. Because Karen painted my panels. Because Karen thought sunlight glare was more offensive than human safety. By the time dawn broke, the neighborhood was a disaster zone of broken glass, flashing sirens, and scorched tempers. And that's when I made my move. I took the Ring footage. I took my battery output logs. And I took a letter from the Marshal's daughter, who's a trauma nurse at County General, explaining what her parents went through that night. And I marched it straight to the HOA emergency meeting. You should have seen Karen's face when the footage hit the screen. She tried to speak, denied it was her, claimed it was for community standards. But then something no one expected happened. Officer Talia Ng, a patrol cop who happened to live a few blocks over, and someone Karen had written up for parking violations, stood up. She pulled out her phone, played audio. Paint those ugly panels gray, just like the regs say. HOA Code 12.3. He wants to act like he's off-grid? Let him live in the dark. Karen's voice, clear as day, recorded on a neighborhood group call she thought was private. That room went ice cold. People gasped. Some booed. Even her 2 closest supporters, the McCoys, slouched in their seats. Talia didn't stop there. The Marshalls had a silent emergency alert system linked to their medical fridge. It failed because of the blackout, she said. We could have lost them. Karen stood frozen, pale, sweating. I didn't scream, didn't gloat, but I looked her right in the eyes and said, "You painted death across those panels. You just didn't know whose door it would knock on." Karen didn't say a word. She stood there, blinking, as if the whole world had tilted underneath her feet. And in a way it had. Because for the first time since she took over our HOA, the crowd wasn't nodding along. They weren't cowed by her smug voice or hollow threats of infractions. No, they were staring at her like she'd just poured gasoline on our roofs and struck a match. One of the neighbors, Mr. Din, raised his voice calm but firm. My mother's oxygen machine runs off battery power. Your actions could have killed her. That did it. The room erupted. Voices from every side, complaints, accusations, frustration bottled up for months. Karen had fined people for using biodegradable trash bags, for having garden gnomes, even for parking 1 inch too close to the sidewalk. But this was criminal. And that's when the twist came, the part none of us saw coming. Council member Denise LaForge was in the back. She hadn't said a word until now. Nobody even knew she was coming. She stepped forward, her heels echoing sharp on the tile floor, and held up a manila envelope. I received this 3 days ago, she said, looking directly at Karen. Anonymous tip. Photos, video, audio recordings. It didn't make sense until I saw that ring footage tonight. She opened the envelope and pulled out a printed HOA fine dated 2 weeks before the incident with my name on it, and a handwritten note that read, "Make an example of this one." It had Karen's signature. Then came the audio. A clipped conversation from a coffee shop, recorded clear as day. "If I take out Ramirez's panels, the others will fall in line. That's how you maintain control." Karen's voice, no mistaking it, gasps again. Denise continued, calm and brutal. "This isn't just vandalism. It's premeditated sabotage with public safety consequences. I've already forwarded this to the district attorney's office." Karen's mouth opened. No sound came out. She looked around searching for a friendly face, anyone who might defend her. None came. Her so-called allies stared at their shoes or folded their arms. Someone whispered, "Call the police." Another neighbor nodded. "She's done." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, that precise second, Karen Monroe realized that her reign of terror wasn't just over. It was being erased, undone by her own hubris, her own words, her own belief that power meant immunity. She stumbled out of the room, heels clacking like a retreating dictator, eyes wide and wet. But the fallout was just beginning. 2 days later, detectives showed up at her house with a warrant. I watched from my porch as she tried to smile her way out of it, offering lemonade to the officers like nothing had happened. But they weren't interested in sweet tea diplomacy. They bagged evidence, took her HOA files, her laptop, and then they took her. In handcuffs. News crews followed. A neighbor's son, a college student in journalism, live-streamed it to TikTok. It went viral in under 24 hours. Solar sabotage Karen. HOA revolt. Justice for the panels. But what got to me most wasn't the social media storm. It was the quiet knock on my door that night, Mrs. Marshall. She was shaking, still recovering from the break-in. She handed me a tin of cookies. Said, "You saved our lives, Leo. And you didn't have to." I wanted to say, no, I didn't save anything. I just refused to be silenced. But I knew what she meant. Karen's paintbrush might have robbed us of power, but it gave us something far stronger in return: unity. In the weeks that followed, the HOA board voted to suspend all current enforcement actions and undergo a full audit. Karen was removed permanently. The bylaws were rewritten with input from actual residents, not just one clipboard tyrant. And me? I got new solar panels, this time with industrial anti-paint coating. The company threw them in at half price when they saw the story on the news. But I also installed a new sign under the roof eave. Burned into a cedar plank. It reads, "Power belongs to the people, not the petty." And I mean every damn word of it. The day Karen Monroe was officially charged with felony vandalism, reckless endangerment, and civil liability for 3 separate property losses, the air in our neighborhood felt lighter. Like the collective weight of fear had been lifted. People started waving again. Kids rode bikes without parents anxiously watching over their shoulders. It was like color came back to the block. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't over. Her trial was set for early fall, and it quickly became the most talked about event in the entire county. Local news ran it as the HOA sabotage scandal. The anchor opened with a now infamous headline, Karen painted the sun and ended her reign. The prosecution wasted no time. They laid out the timeline with brutal clarity. HOA citations she personally escalated without board consent. The secret fine memo she signed. Surveillance footage of her on my roof, trespassing and painting. Audio from her example remark. The power grid outage logs. Emergency call transcripts from that night, including one where Mr. Marshall gasped, "We're in the dark, my wife can't breathe." The courtroom was dead silent after that. And then came the witnesses. First, Mrs. Din, voice trembling, described how she'd spent the night sitting beside her 87-year-old mother, fanning her and praying the heat wouldn't take her life. Then Talia Ng, the police officer, took the stand and played even more damning clips from Karen's private HOA recordings, ones she tried to delete from her cloud storage. But they were recovered. In one, Karen clearly stated, "If they want renewable energy, they can move to a commune. This neighborhood has rules and I am the rule." That line? It became meme material. Twitter, TikTok, even Etsy people printed it on mugs, shirts, ironic HOA bingo. But what nobody expected was Karen's defense. She claimed she was the victim, said she was under intense stress, that the HOA pressured her to take action, and that, as a woman in leadership, she was unfairly targeted and misunderstood. My attorney, a pro bono civil rights litigator named Aria Blake, whose own father lived on my street, calmly stood up and held up my daughter's drawing. It was a crayon sketch. A house under stars, windows lit, and solar panels on the roof. Aria said, "This is what Karen painted over. Not just solar panels. Not just a house. But a child's peace of mind. A community's safety. And the belief that rules don't trump lives." Then she turned to Karen and said, "You weren't misunderstood. You were believed for far too long." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Karen's sentence: 18 months suspended sentence, 6 months community service under court supervision. Mandatory restitution payments to the families affected by the break-ins. Lifetime removal from any HOA leadership position. Public apology letter, to be published in the local paper for 6 weeks straight. But the real punishment wasn't in the courtroom. It came afterward, when Karen returned home to find her driveway covered in protest chalk drawings. Not vulgar, just painful. You turned off the lights on your own soul. Safety isn't an aesthetic. This house was once a home, now it's just empty control. Even her longtime friends stopped talking to her. The McCoys moved away. Her niece, who used to post selfies in Karen's garden, took down every photo and posted, "Some people care more about power than people. I wish I'd seen it sooner." She sold her house 6 weeks later. For a loss. Rumor was she tried to apply for a new HOA board in a neighboring town. But the story had followed her. Everywhere.